Hello, I'm Msgr. Jim Lisante. Today on Personally Speaking, I'll be joined by actor, singer, and musician Kyle Riabko. Please stay with us. Hello and welcome to Personally Speaking. I'm your host, Msgr. Jim Lisante, and the multi-talented Canadian-born artist Kyle Riabko joins me now. Kyle was signed to a record deal at the age of 15 that allowed him to make an album and tour his home continent and then the whole world. He opened for a wide range of artists, including B.B. King, John Mayer, Jason Mraz, and Maroon 5. Kyle went on to star on Broadway, replacing Jonathan Groff in the Tony-winning musical Spring Awakening. He followed that with a starring role in the Broadway hit revival of Hair. Kyle Riabko created and starred in the critically acclaimed What's It All About? Burt Bacharach Reimagined, off-Broadway and in London's West End, arranging the music of Burt Bacharach into something both new and classic. The show received enthusiastic support from Burt Bacharach, who said, quote, "Kyle has done something truly unique with my music." After his success with Burt Bacharach Reimagined, Kyle turned his attention to his creative interpretation of another American music icon, Richard Rodgers, with his album Richard Rodgers Reimagined. He's here with us today to talk about his life, his career, and the values that matter the most to him. Joining me now, I'm so pleased to welcome to Personally Speaking, actor, singer, composer, Kyle Riabko. Before we get to our interview with Kyle, let's listen to him singing. This is Kyle's interpretation of My Funny Valentine.
My funny Valentine, sweet comic Valentine, you make me smile with my heart. Your looks are laughable, unphotographable, yet you're my favorite work of art. Is your figure less than great? Is your mouth a little weak when you open it to speak? Are you smart? Change your hair for me. Don't change your hair for me. Not if you care for me. Not if you care for me. Stay, little Valentine. Stay. Each day is Valentine's Day.
Kyle Riabko is our guest. Kyle, let me start with a question I'm sure no one's asked you in a while. What's the background of that name, Riabko? What kind of name, and what's the ethnicity behind it?
Yeah, it's Ukrainian.
Cool.
So
Okay.
I grew up in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, which is right in the middle of Canada, and kind of in the middle of nowhere. But the province is filled with Ukrainian people.
Really?
Yeah, it goes back. I'm probably butchering the story, but back when, no one had moved to Canada yet because it was so frigid and cold and no one knew how to break the land.
Right.
Someone found out that Ukrainians were particularly good at that job. So they allowed them to immigrate and gave them free land. So that's kind of where I come from.
Okay. How long has the family been in Saskatoon?
Yeah. So my great grandparents moved to Saskatchewan. So, I don't know how many years that is, but a couple of generations. But my parents grew up in a really small town called Yorkton.
Okay.
I think now there are about maybe 15,000 people there or something. And
Wow. Okay.
they both grew up there, went to high school there, met in high school, and are still together. And that's the whole story.
And mommy's side also Ukrainian?
Yes, Ukrainian, but her father was Russian, so there's a little bit of Russian in there as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you have roots in Ukraine, do you have any, do you follow with any interest the colorful situation going on in that country?
It's such a good question, and my dad and I talk about this every once in a while. We should more than we do is the honest truth. I think my family definitely feels more Canadian than Ukrainian, but we have that last name and it follows us around. And you said people probably don't ask you this question a lot, but the truth is it's a name that is unusual to people. Right. So actually it does come up quite a bit, and I wish I did know more, to be honest.
Especially now, they're going through some stormy times. The fight for democracy, the end of corruption, many of the same issues that we have here as well. But
tell me about it. Yeah.
Fascinating people and the pressure from the West and the East. But listen, back to music. For our listeners, Kyle Riabko has been essentially performing since he was 10 or 11 years old. He's now in his 30s. Here's my question for you. When you've been 20 years doing music on the road, concerts and all the rest, there's so much in your life that you've experienced that many people your age wouldn't have. But then I see the other side, and I wonder, do you ever feel like you miss the normalcy of growing up?
Yes, I do. Yeah. That's been a struggle for me in my life. When I started, the wheels started spinning really quickly. Like you said, I was 10. Yeah. I was talented. I had a guitar. I played fast solos on the guitar. People said, you're great. Boom, boom, boom. You blink and suddenly you have a record deal and you're on tour, and all these things that no kid would ever stop to say, is this really what I want to do?
Right.
Of course it is. It's a dream. Yeah. And it was a dream, but I always knew in the back of my mind, going back to what we just talked about, growing up in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, the values there are family first. And I've always been a family first person my whole life. In fact, I got it tattooed to my arm here when I was very young. And so I as happy as the music made me, I've always carried around a little bit of a sadness about not having those formative years, just being a normal kid. There were frustrating times when I just wanted to hang out with my friends, but had to go to Australia on a tour, and what the problem with that dilemma is that you can't be ungrateful, or you feel like you can't be ungrateful for. So it's a tricky thing. And that, I'm jumping now to the present, but that's what I've been striving for my entire life is a balance between those two things. And I found it now in my wife. We've been married for a few years now, and we're both performers, but we both have the same set of values where we're like, we are a family that knows how to perform, not the other way around. That's how I look at it.
Kyle, if you and Stephanie decide to have children, would you encourage them to embrace an artist's life, knowing that it's a life on the road?
You're asking every single perfect question. You're asking the questions that we ask ourselves daily.
Okay.
And when Steph and I are ranting about the state of the world or the state of the industry or whatever, there are times when we'll say, I would never let my kid get into this. I would never allow it, blah, 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 blah. But what happens if someday when we have kids, they come to us with a talent that's undeniable? You can't, you don't know that until you're the parent of that child. And, to some degree, that's what my parents were probably up against. They were incredibly supportive of me. But I know that there was a part of them that, had to say goodbye to their 14-year-old son and not really see him that much at all. And that is not easy. So, and beyond that, there's a lot of pain that being in this business brings. And I would be hesitant to encourage my kids to get into it, but then you realize there's pain and disappointment everywhere.
Sure.
They become a lawyer, there's pain and disappointment there. Maybe they don't have, experience the passion and the joy of life that they might as an artist. So it's a real balancing act. I think what's amazing is that Steph and I now have the tools to guide our kids through this, if it ends up being what they decide to do, you know.
If you and Steph have that opportunity to be parents, when you look back at your parents, you said, first of all, they're very supportive of your career, but in their whole life as parents for you, what have they done right?
Oh my God. I mean, what they did right was, well, I'll put it this way. When things started really rolling for me, I was very young. I was like 12, you know,
Right.
and suddenly there were suddenly you get a phone call and like someone had booked a tour in Eastern Canada and you just did it. And so, of course, I was so young, my dad would come along, you know, to drive the van and supervise. And before those tours, I'm thinking of one memory in particular. My dad literally said to me, okay, we're going to leave and go on this tour. And just so you know, I'm going to be friend first on this tour, dad second. So I want us to go as friends, and I'm your dad. I'm there for you, but I'm here for you as a friend. And so what that did was it immediately allowed me to sort of spread my wings as a performer. I never felt like dad's love or mom's love was connected to success or failure.
Wow.
It was always just, you know, we're in this together. We're friends. We don't know from this. We don't know playing concerts. We've never heard of that. We grew up with farmers, you know. So that's what they did right. And it takes an incredible amount of will. So now that we're getting to the age of where we're looking, you know, towards being parents, I'm starting to realize how challenging that must have been for my parents, because the instinct is to control the environment. And my parents did the opposite. They understood the lack of control, and they kind of, they helped me feel safe within that.
Yeah. Kyle, every artist goes through a period that's a little fallow. You have worked incredibly for so many years, but I'm wondering, when you've gone after things that didn't turn out, and every artist goes through that, how does Kyle Riabko personally deal with disappointment, rejection, letdown, having a dream that doesn't get fulfilled right away? How do you personally deal with that?
It's a great question. I mean, you want to say, oh, I know exactly how to deal with that, and I just chalk it up to, you know, another regular disappointment that I was expecting. But the truth is that I feel sad when that happens. I feel angry. There's a lot of anger that one feels, especially when you've had success as a young person. When you've had success, you weren't prepared for disappointments. You know, most people go through life, whether it's in college or whatever, where they experience those disappointments. You know, for me, it was success, success, success. And then I hadn't developed that ability to accept disappointment. So it's tough. It's not like it rolls off of my back. I'd be lying if I said that. But, you know, now my wife helps me through that, you know, in an incredibly helpful way. And I think I help her through hers as well, because we have a knowledge of each other's, you know, experiences, and we're in the same industry. So again, it comes back to family for me. I look inward. I look to the home, you know.
Kyle Riabko, for our listeners around the world, is an actor, is a singer, is a composer, but he has especially enlightened a lot of the young generation to re-examine the music of Burt Bacharach and Richard Rodgers. I guess, Kyle, my question would be, and I'm sure you've examined this before, as a young man, you're celebrating a man who's not a young man. I grew up on the music of Burt Bacharach, but where did you get the interest or the desire to study who he was, what he meant, and to offer your own interpretation? Yeah,
well, so I've always listened to music from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. I've always existed in that world. So that's just a natural whatever. That's where I go. But I didn't grow up as a Burt Bacharach fan. I was more blues rock. I was Jimi Hendrix, Paul Simon, singer-songwriter, that kind of stuff. So the Burt Bacharach thing it wasn't on my radar as much. But what happened was, after I had been in a few, shows on Broadway and different things like that, I got a call from Burt. I think that he had seen me in a show or something, asking me to come into the studio and be a hired singer on some new music he was writing. So he still writes every day, by the way, even right now. He's 92 years old. He gets up and writes every day. So he's often going into the studio and hiring singers to sing the songs. So, I went, knowing that this was a legend, but sort of assuming I'd be in and out in an hour and it'd be a story I could tell. Yeah. But what happened was I got there, and what Burt was doing, being in the presence of his greatness and his work ethic was so mind-blowing that I sort of knew I had to weasel my way in further into his life. I didn't want it to just be that 1 hour. I wanted to mine him for something. And I invited my manager, David Seltzer, to one of those sessions, and he's a huge Burt Bacharach fan. And afterwards, we started talking about how I could weasel my way into Burt's life, and like, what's an idea? What could we do with Burt's music? This is just too good. And there's something about the matching of me, a young person, with him, and an older person. And so we started brainstorming. Well, I could cover a few of his songs and maybe put in an album. Yeah, but then that doesn't have much to do with Burt himself. What if I took a whole bunch of his music and created a new piece of music, used that music and sort of pieced it together like a collage, like a love letter to his abilities? And that's a good idea. Let me try it. And so I went home to my home studio and started recording some arrangements, and told Burt's manager, hey, I have something that I'd like to play for Burt. I think it could be something interesting. I don't know what it will lead to, but I would love to play it for him. And she said, sure. And then dragged on for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. He's a very busy guy. And, anyways, long and short, I ended up getting the meeting. And I had this demo tape with me. It was a very nerve-wracking experience. And I pressed play and I sat there in the music room, with his Grammys on the walls and his pictures. And press play, and I'm sitting there watching Burt Bacharach, listening to me playing Burt Bacharach. It was surreal. And he sort of lifted his head after a while, and he was like, Kyle, it's good. And he immediately took to the idea. He became, an incredible support. And then we started brainstorming. What could this be? A concert? What should it be? And we decided to turn it into a theatrical piece, that could kind of live on as a review of sorts. And that's what that was. And it changed my life in many different ways.
For our listeners, he did that not only with Burt Bacharach, but has done that wonderfully with the music of Richard Rodgers. I hope our listeners will pick up that album as well. Obviously, you didn't have a chance to hang out with Richard Rodgers, but again, where the interest in this seemingly old world music, but you have brought to it a whole modern dimension that's just absolutely delightful. How come Richard Rodgers?
Well, that's directly related to Burt. So after that first meeting, what I would do is I would work on a chunk of the show, like 20 minutes at a time, and take it to Burt's house, play for him, because you needed his approval to get the rights to do the show. So every time I would go into his house, I would sort of sneakily look around. It's, as you can imagine, in a huge place, and there's memorabilia everywhere. So I would always be scanning what's going on. There's and I saw two French letters in a really prominent place. So it was clear that Bert wanted everyone who visited him to see them. There were two letters. And as I took a closer look, I realized they were fan letters to Bert. One of them was from Paul McCartney, and the other one was from Richard Rodgers. And it was written in the very early 70s, and it was, paraphrasing here, but it was basically, Bert, I love what you're doing. I just want you to know I'm a fan, and I see you as the next in line, in this songbook thing that we do. And when I saw that, I just went, oh, wow, that's incredible.
Kyle, every weekend, because I'm a priest, I get to do weddings, and I love doing them. But to prepare for them so that I don't just give some canned homily, I ask every couple I marry to write me an essay. Why, of all the people in the world, of the billions out there, why is this the one? If you had been asked to do that on Stephanie, have you figured out why, of the billion choices out there, why is Stephanie the one for you?
She makes me laugh.
Okay.
And it's all laughter all the time. And for us, marriage is a way of communicating and laughing through this life that becomes more and more absurd as they go. So if you don't have someone to laugh about it with, I don't know what you do.
Yeah.
So that's what it is for us. It's just, I always say, like, the day we met, we started talking, and it feels like we've never stopped that conversation. It's an ongoing conversation, but we talk a lot. We're talkers, and that's what it is. She's, going back to my parents, I am lucky enough to have grown up with two parents who stayed together for, years and years and years, and are still very happily married. And people would often comment on that, like, how rare that is.
Yeah.
And so I would So I would every once in a while ask my parents what they think the secret is, and they would say, look, we're best friends. We're best friends first and foremost, and it's as simple as that.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
that it's that, and it's the laughing.
Laughter and best friends. I get to remarry couples a lot who are 50, 60, 70 years married. And when I say to them, what kept you together? Nobody says great looks. Nobody says good sex.
Yeah.
But I married my best friend. She had my back. I had her back. And you're right. Laughter, the ability to laugh is one of the great blessings in any relationship. And you've been blessed to have it. Do you have any idea if I asked Stephanie, could you write me a letter on why did she pick you?
I think she would. I think she'd say the same thing.
Yeah.
Is the truth. I really do. It's really true with us. It's sort of like, look, I was never sure what marriage was, why marriage. When I grew up as a musician, most people you're around aren't sitting around talking about marriage. It's like career first and being on the road and all that kind of stuff. So it was always this sort of mysterious thing to me.
Mm-hmm.
And, when I met Steph, it was, yes, the laughter, but it was also just this innate feeling where I realized I felt like myself in a way that I hadn't since childhood. It was weird. It's like a childlike return.
Kyle, I promise my last question. With all the stuff that you have to deal with in life and that we all have to deal with, would you define Kyle Riabko as a person of hope? Are you hopeful for the future?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you have to be. It's important to be. I'm concerned about the future. Mm-hmm. I'm definitely concerned. I don't think that negates the ability to also be hopeful. Mm-hmm. In fact, maybe it's important to be concerned, because then you can look out for things and make sure you're helping steer this industry, or just people in general in the right direction. But I am hopeful, and I think it's always about looking to the younger generation and seeing what they're bringing to the table, and their naivete is important, because they're artists and you watch them sort of blossom. So yeah, I'm hopeful. I just don't know exactly how how things are going to turn out in a lot of ways.
Kyle, for our listeners around the world who now may not have known before we did this show about your music, how do they get hold of your music, of Burt Bacharach's music through you, Richard Rodgers? Where do people go to find out more about Kyle Riabko?
It's everywhere. Well, I have a website, kyleriabko.com.
Okay.
And the music's on Spotify. You know, you can look up Bacharach Reimagined. It's on Apple Music. It's in all those normal places. But you know, yeah, Bacharach Reimagined is a good place to start.
Good place to start. And Kyle, for people my age who are still playing CDs, are your songs available by virtue of CD too?
Yes, they are. They're on Amazon.
Every time I have a singer on, they say, well, you know, just download. And I'm saying, but more than half of my audience is saying, what's a download? So
No,
you're saying...
I'm with you.
All right. I want to thank Kyle Riabko for being with us. I hope you'll get his music. I love his music, his interpretation of Burt Bacharach. His own stuff that he's written is magnificent as well, but his Richard Rodgers stuff, which is most recent to me, is particularly a gift, I think. He's a guy you want to listen to. His interpretations are unique. I wanted today for us, though, not just to talk about his music, but about the man. And I love the fact that tattooed on his arm is remembering what matters most, which is family. And my hope for you, Kyle, is that you and Stephanie, when you get around to having those kids, can be as good as parents for them as your own parents have been for you. Kyle, thanks so much for being on our show.
Wow, thank you so much for having me.
As we end today's program, I want to thank all of you for being with us. If you have any questions or comments about the show, you can send them to me through my website, which is www.closeencountertv.com. All one word, closeencountertv.com. To listen to our Personally Speaking podcast with some of our most recent shows, please go to YouTube and search under Personally Speaking with Msgr Jim Lisante and subscribe. Personally Speaking is also available as a podcast on Apple Podcasts, iHeart, and Spotify. You can also listen to past episodes by going to www.ollmp.org, ollmp.org, and you get not only recent shows, but also Msgr Jim's weekly homilies. I'm privileged to serve as host and executive producer of Personally Speaking. Our producer is Lisa Jadovitz, and thank you all so much for being with us. We'll be with you again next time on Personally Speaking.